After 15 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation Specialized Financial Crimes Division, I had seen enough of the darkness humans were capable of inflicting on one another. My work involved tracking money laundering operations that often funded everything from drug trafficking to human exploitation rings. The cases we built put dangerous people behind bars, but the constant exposure to human cruelty had begun to wear on my soul. I needed balance, something to remind me that not everything in this world was corrupt. That is when I decided to create my animal sanctuary. The 5-acre property I purchased sat at the edge of Rolling Hills Estates, a rural community with sprawling pastures and mature oak trees. The realtor mentioned there was a homeowners association, but assured me they were primarily concerned with maintaining property values through basic upkeep requirements. This seemed reasonable enough. The previous owner had let the place fall into disrepair, so I understood why neighbors might want assurances the property would be restored to its former beauty. What drew me to this particular location was the existing barn and fenced pastures. The main house needed work, but the outbuildings were structurally sound. I envisioned filling these spaces with animals that deserved second chances, creatures that had been abused, neglected, or abandoned. My federal salary afforded me the means to provide proper veterinary care and nutrition, while my rotating schedule of 2 weeks on duty followed by 1 week off gave me sufficient time for their daily needs. Within 6 months, the sanctuary became home to 4 rescued cats, 2 former laboratory beagles, a 3-legged goat named Tripod, and 6 chickens saved from a shuttered industrial farm. Each animal arrived with its own trauma, but watching them heal in this peaceful environment brought me more satisfaction than any successful case closure ever had. My colleagues at the Bureau found my hobby amusing, but understood my need for this counterbalance to our often grim work. Then came thunder. The local sheriff's department had conducted a raid on a property where numerous animal welfare violations had been reported. What they found was heartbreaking. A once magnificent Appaloosa stallion, reduced to skin and bones, standing in filth with untreated wounds covering his body. When the sheriff contacted area rescue organizations, none had the facilities for equine rehabilitation. Knowing my background, he called me directly. The day Thunder arrived, he could barely stand. His once powerful muscles had atrophied. His coat was dull and patchy, and fear showed in his eyes whenever humans approached. The veterinarian estimated he was about 7 years old and had likely once been a show horse before falling into neglectful hands. The recovery process would be long and expensive, but the moment his soft muzzle tentatively reached out to touch my outstretched hand, I knew we were meant to help each other heal. For 3 months, I worked with Thunder daily. Proper nutrition slowly filled out his frame. Daily grooming restored his spotted coat to a lustrous shine. Trust exercises gradually replaced his fear with curiosity. The first day he galloped across the pasture, head high and tail flagged, I sat on the fence and wept. He had reclaimed his spirit despite all humans had done to break it. 6 months into my ownership of the property, I received my first visit from Karen Westfield, president of the Rolling Hills Estates Homeowners Association. She arrived unannounced one Saturday morning, clipboard in hand, wearing a crisp white blouse and khaki pants despite the rural setting. Her silver bob haircut framed a face set in permanent disapproval. I was in the pasture with Thunder when she rapped sharply on the fence. "Good morning. I am Karen Westfield, HOA president. I am conducting routine property inspections today," she announced without introducing herself properly. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Thunder. "I was not aware you were keeping horses on the property." I explained the rescue sanctuary concept, emphasizing my compliance with all county animal welfare regulations. She nodded stiffly, making notes on her clipboard. Though she said nothing openly disapproving, the way her gaze lingered on certain features of my property. The specialized animal enclosures, the recently delivered pile of hay bales, the veterinary supplies visible through the barn door, suggested she was mentally cataloging potential violations. As she departed with a thin-lipped smile, I felt the first twinge of unease. Something in her expression told me this would not be our last interaction. The first violation notice arrived 3 weeks later, printed on Rolling Hills Estates HOA letterhead and sealed in an official-looking envelope. According to the notice, my mailbox did not conform to community standards. The post was 2 inches taller than permitted in the bylaws, and the box itself was not an approved color. The notice instructed me to remedy these infractions within 14 days or face an initial fine of $200, with additional penalties accruing daily after the deadline. I found this puzzling since at least half the mailboxes I had observed in the community varied considerably in style and color. Nevertheless, I purchased a new mailbox that matched the specifications exactly and installed it the following weekend. As a law enforcement professional, I respected the importance of rules, even seemingly arbitrary ones. My goal was to be a good neighbor while providing for my rescue animals. The second notice arrived before the mailbox paint had fully dried. This time, the violation concerned the height of my lawn grass, which allegedly exceeded the 3-inch maximum by approximately half an inch. 2 more notices followed in quick succession, one regarding the visibility of my trash cans from the road, though they were stored behind a small enclosure, and another about unapproved landscaping modifications, referring to the new native plant garden I had installed to replace water-hungry non-native species. These petty complaints seemed targeted, especially since I regularly jogged through the neighborhood and observed numerous properties with similar or more significant issues that appeared to receive no citations. My investigative instincts activated. I began researching past HOA activities through public records and conversations with neighbors. What emerged was a troubling pattern. Karen Westfield had served as HOA president for 6 consecutive years, running unopposed each term. During her tenure, several homeowners had sold their properties and moved away after experiencing what they described as harassment campaigns involving selective enforcement of obscure bylaws. One evening, while organizing the mounting violation notices at my kitchen table, I heard the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. Looking up, I glimpsed Karen standing at the edge of my property, photographing the barn area. I approached her directly, maintaining my professional demeanor despite my growing frustration. "Ms. Westfield, is there something specific about my property that concerns you? I have addressed all the violations noted in your notices." Karen lowered her camera, her expression hardening. "Actually, there is a major concern. Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our covenant clearly prohibits livestock on residential properties. Your horse is in direct violation of HOA regulations." I explained patiently that Thunder was not livestock, but a rescue animal being rehabilitated under federally protected animal welfare provisions. I even offered to show her the documentation from the sheriff's department and veterinarian certifying his rescue status. Federal law supersedes HOA regulations in matters of animal welfare and rescue operations, I informed her, keeping my tone neutral despite her increasingly hostile stance. Karen's face flushed red. "This is not a commercial rescue facility. This is a residential community with clear guidelines that you agreed to follow when you purchased this property. The board will not stand for this flagrant disregard of our standards." Before I could respond further, she turned on her heel and marched toward her luxury SUV parked at the curb. As she pulled away, I noticed her speaking intently into her phone. The confrontation left me unsettled. My years in law enforcement had taught me to recognize when someone was building a case, and Karen was clearly gathering ammunition against me and my sanctuary. That evening, I reviewed the HOA covenant documents thoroughly. The livestock prohibition did exist, but so did exceptions for pets and companion animals. Thunder and my other rescues clearly qualified under these exceptions. Additionally, federal protections for verified animal rescue operations would take precedence if this dispute escalated to legal channels. Still, I recognized the beginning of what could become a consuming conflict, exactly what I had sought to avoid in creating this peaceful sanctuary. The monthly HOA board meeting was held in the community center, a building whose colonial architectural style seemed at odds with the rural surroundings. I arrived prepared, carrying a leather portfolio containing all relevant documentation: county permits for animal keeping, federal guidelines on rescue operations, veterinary records, and photographs documenting Thunder's rehabilitation progress. As a federal agent, I understood the importance of thorough documentation and professional presentation. The meeting room filled quickly with about 30 residents. I recognized some as neighbors who had waved friendly greetings during my morning runs, though none approached me directly now. Karen sat at the center of a long table at the front, flanked by 4 other board members. Her silver bob caught the harsh fluorescent lighting as she called the meeting to order precisely at 7 o'clock. Community business proceeded methodically: budget approvals, discussion of upcoming road repairs, planning for the summer picnic. When the agenda reached new business, Karen gestured toward me with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "We have a resident who wishes to address the board regarding animal keeping regulations. You have 5 minutes." I approached the podium and introduced myself, explaining briefly about the sanctuary and my compliance with all relevant regulations. I distributed copies of my documentation to each board member, noting how Thunder and my other rescues qualified as companion animals under the HOA's own bylaws. I concluded by expressing my desire to be a positive contribution to the community while continuing my rescue work. As I spoke, I observed Karen leaning toward the board member beside her, whispering comments that caused him to frown. When I finished my presentation, Karen spoke before any other board member could respond. "While we appreciate your enthusiasm for animals, Rolling Hills Estates is not zoned for what amounts to a private zoo. The board has received numerous complaints about odors, noise, and decreased property values resulting from your activities." This was blatantly false. My property was immaculately maintained, and my closest neighbor was over a quarter-mile away. Before I could challenge these claims, 3 residents stood to voice complaints that seemed suspiciously rehearsed, describing problems that could not possibly have occurred. One elderly man claimed my farm animals had kept him awake with noise, despite living on the opposite side of the community. A woman asserted that water runoff from my property had damaged her garden, physically impossible given the topography. When the vote came, it was unanimous against me. The board would proceed with enforcement actions unless I returned the property to residential standards within 30 days. The meaning was clear: the animals must go. As the meeting adjourned, I caught Karen's satisfied smirk before she quickly composed her features into a mask of bureaucratic neutrality. The following morning, I discovered the first note tucked under my windshield wiper. Printed in block letters on plain paper, it read simply, "Get rid of the horse or we will. No signature, no fingerprints. I checked immediately with my field kit. 2 days later, another note appeared on my front porch. HORSES die easily. ACCID and TS happen. These threats crossed a line. That afternoon, I installed security cameras covering every approach to my property. The same high-grade surveillance equipment we used for FBI stakeouts. I positioned them discreetly, not wanting to escalate the situation visibly while ensuring complete coverage of the animal enclosures, particularly Thunder's pasture and water sources. Margaret Chen, my neighbor to the east and the only person who had smiled at me during the HOA meeting, stopped by as I was finishing the installation. In her 70s, Margaret had lived in Rolling Hills Estates since its development 20 years earlier. She brought homemade cookies and a warning. "I saw what happened at the meeting. You are not the first, you know. 3 years ago, the Andersons had a therapy dog for their autistic son. Karen found some obscure provision about dog breeds. They fought it. Then suddenly their tires were slashed, garbage dumped on their lawn. They moved away within 6 months." Margaret lowered her voice, though no one else was present. "Last year, the Garcias wanted to install solar panels. Karen blocked it through the architectural committee. When they appealed, someone reported them for tax irregularities. The investigation found nothing, but the stress was too much. They sold at a loss." I thanked Margaret for the information, my law enforcement mind cataloging these incidents as potential pattern evidence. That evening, reviewing the first day of security footage, I discovered something disturbing. During the 4 hours I had been away at my federal office, Karen had entered my property, walking along the fence line of Thunder's pasture, taking photographs and making notes. The trespassing itself was concerning, but more alarming was Thunder's reaction. The usually calm horse paced nervously, avoiding the side of the pasture where Karen stood. Over the next 2 weeks, Thunder's behavior changed dramatically. He startled at small noises, refused his favorite treats, and developed signs of stress including weight loss and patchy sweating. The veterinarian found no medical cause during her examination, but noted that horses are highly sensitive to environmental stressors. "Something is frightening this animal," she concluded, prescribing a mild sedative for extreme anxiety episodes. The security footage revealed Karen had made 3 more unauthorized visits to my property line during my absence. Each time, she paid particular attention to Thunder's water trough and feed area. My federal agent instincts were now on high alert. This was no longer about HOA regulations. Something more sinister was developing. I began documenting every incident meticulously, establishing a timeline of escalation that any prosecutor would find compelling. The call from my field supervisor came at the worst possible time. A major case I had been building evidence for over the past year was accelerating. A money laundering operation connected to a multi-state drug distribution network had shown unusual activity, indicating imminent movement of funds. My presence was required immediately for surveillance operations that could last several days. "I cannot leave right now," I explained, detailing the escalating situation with the HOA and the threats against my animals. My supervisor was sympathetic but firm. This operation represented months of careful work. Our target might not present such an opportunity again. "Take necessary precautions for your property and report the threats to local authorities," he advised. "But I need you on this surveillance team. Your expertise with financial tracking is critical for this operation." After ending the call, I phoned Margaret, who readily agreed to check on the animals twice daily during my absence. I gave her detailed feeding instructions and the veterinarian's emergency contact information. As additional precautions, I installed 3 more camera angles focusing specifically on Thunder's enclosure and set up real-time alerts to my phone. Before departing, I filled all water troughs freshly, provided 3 days of pre-measured feed in sealed containers, and moved Thunder to the pasture furthest from property boundaries. The surveillance operation was intense, requiring round-the-clock monitoring from a cramped apartment overlooking our target location. By the 3rd day, we had collected substantial evidence documenting the money flow, but the strain of constant vigilance while worrying about my sanctuary was taking its toll. Margaret had reported everything normal during her morning and evening visits, but something felt wrong. I could not shake the feeling of impending trouble. That night at 2:37 a.m., my phone chimed with a security alert. The camera covering Thunder's water trough had detected movement during night hours, unusual since horses typically do not drink much after dark. The grainy night vision footage showed a figure in dark clothing approaching the water source, then leaning over it momentarily before disappearing into the shadows. The resolution was too poor in the low light to make a positive identification, but the build and movement pattern were consistent with Karen's. I immediately called Margaret, waking her from sleep. Please check Thunder first thing in the morning before his regular feeding time. Do not let him drink from the main trough. Use the backup water bucket in the shed. At 7:15 a.m., Margaret's call confirmed my worst fears. Something is wrong with your horse. He is down in the pasture. He will not get up and he is breathing strangely. I called the vet already. I notified my supervisor of the emergency and left the surveillance operation, driving well above the speed limit for the 90-minute journey home. When I arrived, the veterinarian's truck was already parked by the barn. Thunder lay on his side in the pasture, his breathing labored and foam flecking his muzzle. His magnificent body shuddered with spasms. The veterinarian, Dr. Rodriguez, was administering intravenous fluids when I ran to them. What happened? What is wrong with him? I demanded, dropping to my knees beside Thunder's head. His eyes, usually so bright and alert, were glazed with pain. He weakly nickered upon recognizing my voice. Classic signs of poisoning, Dr. Rodriguez answered grimly, indicating the vial of blood she had drawn. I have sent samples for toxicology, but given the symptoms, I suspect antifreeze or a similar toxin. The damage to his kidneys is severe. We need to transport him to the equine hospital immediately for dialysis if he has any chance. We loaded Thunder into the veterinary trailer, his weakened state making the process heartbreaking. I rode in the trailer with him, stroking his neck and speaking softly as he drifted in and out of consciousness. At the equine hospital, a team of specialists worked frantically, pumping his system with activated charcoal to absorb remaining toxins and connecting him to a specialized dialysis machine developed for large animals. Despite their heroic efforts, Thunder's condition deteriorated throughout the day. By evening, the lead veterinarian took me aside, her expression solemn. The kidney damage is too extensive. He is suffering, and there is no path to recovery. I recommend humane euthanasia before the pain becomes unbearable. The weight of this decision crushed my chest. This magnificent creature who had survived previous abuse only to find a brief period of happiness at my sanctuary would now die because of human cruelty once again. I nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in my throat. They allowed me private time with Thunder before administering the final injection. I sat beside him on the hospital floor, cradling his head in my lap as I had done during our first days together when he was too weak to stand for long. His breathing was shallow now, each breath a struggle. "I am so sorry, boy," I whispered, stroking his forelock. "You deserved so much better than what humans have given you." When the veterinarians returned, I remained with Thunder through the end, feeling his last breath against my hand as the light faded from his eyes. In 15 years of law enforcement, I had witnessed countless crime scenes, but nothing had prepared me for this personal violation, the deliberate poisoning of an innocent creature under my protection. That night, back at my silent property, I reviewed the security footage from the past 3 days in chronological order. At 1:42 a.m. on the night of my security alert, the camera captured Karen approaching Thunder's water trough carrying a small container. The night vision mode clearly showed her pouring liquid into the water before quickly departing through the break in the hedgerow that separated our properties. The evidence was undeniable. Grief transformed into cold, focused rage. This was no longer about HOA regulations or neighborhood disputes. This was criminal animal cruelty resulting in death, a felony in our state. More importantly, it was a personal attack that had taken a beloved animal from this world out of pure malice. As I stared at the frozen image of Karen's face illuminated by the infrared camera, I made a decision. The federal agent who had carefully kept separate from the homeowner was now fully awake. Karen Westfield had no idea who she had actually been tormenting all these months. She was about to find out. The sheriff's deputy who took my report seemed skeptical until I identified myself as a federal agent and presented the security footage. His demeanor changed immediately. Animal cruelty cases were often difficult to prosecute due to lack of evidence, but the video documentation combined with the veterinary toxicology report created a compelling case. The deputy collected samples from the water trough, took statements from both Margaret and the veterinarian, and promised expedited processing due to the severity of the crime. While local law enforcement handled the animal cruelty investigation, I focused on my own inquiry. Years of training had taught me to compartmentalize emotions and think methodically. I cleared my dining room table, creating a makeshift investigation board similar to those in our field office. Timeline, evidence log, witness statements, and background research, each category meticulously organized. Karen Westfield had moved to Rolling Hills Estates 8 years ago, according to property records. Before that, she had lived in 3 different communities across 2 states, never staying longer than 3 years. In each location, she had served on the Homeowners Association board. This pattern raised immediate red flags. People who frequently relocated while seeking positions of neighborhood authority often had underlying motivations beyond civic duty. I contacted colleagues at field offices near Karen's previous residences, requesting information on any investigations or complaints involving her. Meanwhile, I submitted the toxicology results to our FBI laboratory for confirmation of the specific poison used. The preliminary veterinary report had indicated ethylene glycol poisoning, commonly found in antifreeze, but I wanted federal lab verification to strengthen the eventual case. 3 days after Thunder's death, I received an unexpected call from my supervisor. "I need you to come in immediately. There is something you should see." At the field office, he led me to a conference room where case files were spread across the table. "Remember that money laundering operation we have been tracking? The financial analysis you completed before your emergency showed unusual transfers to a shell corporation. We have identified the principal behind that corporation." He slid a photograph across the table. The image showed Karen Westfield meeting with a known associate of our primary target. She has been on our radar for nearly a year, operating as a mid-level money cleaner for the organization. We had not connected her to your location because she uses multiple identities. The revelation struck like a physical blow. "Are you telling me that my HOA president, the woman who poisoned my horse, is part of our ongoing federal investigation. Not just part of it, she appears to be a significant node in the network. Her position with the HOA gives her a perfect cover for unexplained income and unusual activities. We believe she has been using property disputes to force homeowners to sell at reduced prices, then flipping the properties through her real estate connections to launder cash. The pieces fit together with sickening clarity. Karen's harassment campaign was not merely about control or HOA power. It was about forcing me off my property. My presence as a newcomer who happened to be a federal agent must have seemed threatening to her operation, though she had no way of knowing my specific role or that her organization was under investigation. My transfer to this field office last year was part of positioning agents closer to suspected network locations, I realized aloud. I unknowingly purchased property next to a subject of our own investigation. My supervisor nodded. The coincidence is remarkable, but it now gives us an unexpected advantage. Your animal cruelty case provides probable cause for search warrants we previously lacked sufficient evidence to obtain. That afternoon, I met with the joint task force already assembled for the money laundering case. The team included financial crime specialists, forensic accountants, and agents specializing in organized crime networks. When I presented my documentation of Karen's harassment campaign and the security footage of the poisoning, their interest was palpable. "This is exactly the break we needed," the team leader acknowledged. Her previous operations were careful, no paper trails, no witnesses willing to testify. But this attack on your animal was emotional, impulsive. She made mistakes. We developed a comprehensive strategy combining the local animal cruelty charges with the federal financial crimes investigation. Search warrants were prepared for Karen's residence, vehicle, and HOA office. Electronic surveillance authorization was expedited based on the combined evidence. Every detail was scrutinized to ensure there would be no procedural errors that might compromise the case. The laboratory confirmation arrived the following day. The toxicology report identified ethylene glycol mixed with anticoagulants, a particularly cruel combination that would maximize suffering before death. The specific formulation matched industrial products used by one of the businesses connected to the money laundering operation, creating another link in our case. As the investigation progressed, additional disturbing information emerged. 3 previous homeowners who had clashed with Karen had experienced suspicious pet deaths. None had filed reports, believing the deaths to be unfortunate coincidences. The pattern suggested Thunder was not her first victim, but would certainly be her last. 1 week after Thunder's death, our federal team was ready. The evidence board now displayed a complex network connecting Karen to multiple crimes across several jurisdictions. My grief remained a constant ache, but it had crystallized into something purposeful, a determination to ensure justice not only for Thunder, but for all those Karen had victimized through her reign of neighborhood terror and criminal activities. The operation would require precise timing and the element of surprise. Karen believed she was still dealing with a grieving horse owner who posed no threat to her position or her criminal enterprise. This underestimation would be her undoing. The trap was set. All that remained was for Karen to step into it. The Rolling Hills Estates HOA held its meetings on the first Tuesday of each month. According to the community newsletter delivered to each resident's mailbox, the upcoming meeting would include discussion of property compliance issues and consideration of increased enforcement measures. Thinly veiled references to my sanctuary. Karen had scheduled this topic deliberately, intending it as her moment of triumph after Thunder's death. Instead, it would become the stage for her public downfall. Our federal team spent the week finalizing preparations. Search warrants were officially approved for execution immediately following the HOA meeting. Animal welfare experts documented every aspect of Thunder's case, building an ironclad animal cruelty prosecution that would run parallel to the financial crimes charges. Surveillance teams monitored Karen's movements, confirming she was unaware of the investigation closing around her. I maintained a deliberately subdued profile, appearing withdrawn and defeated when collecting my mail or driving through the neighborhood. When Karen's silver SUV passed me on the road, I caught her satisfied smile in my peripheral vision. She believed she had won, that I was preparing to abandon my property as others had done before me. This perception was crucial to our strategy. The evening of the HOA meeting arrived with perfect early summer weather, warm with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming magnolias. I dressed in muted colors, a deliberate contrast to my usual professional attire. The community center parking lot was nearly full when I arrived, exactly as planned. Our operation required maximum community witnesses for what was about to unfold. Inside, the meeting room hummed with conversation that hushed noticeably as I entered. Some residents averted their eyes with what appeared to be shame. Others watched curiously to see how the neighborhood drama would develop. Karen sat at the center of the board table, arranging papers with brisk efficiency. Her silver bob caught the fluorescent light as she looked up, noticing my arrival with a barely concealed smirk. The meeting progressed through routine business, with Karen frequently checking her watch, clearly impatient to reach the agenda item that concerned me. When she finally called for discussion of non-compliant property use at 1742 Meadowlark Lane, her tone carried artificial regret that fooled no one. As you all know, we have had ongoing issues with improper animal keeping at this address, she began, gesturing toward me without making eye contact. Sadly, I understand there was a recent incident resulting in the death of the horse being kept illegally on the property. While this is unfortunate, it demonstrates the reasons our community guidelines prohibit such animals. They require specialized care that residential properties cannot properly provide. The calculated cruelty of her statement, delivered with bureaucratic coldness after she had deliberately poisoned Thunder, confirmed she was exactly the person our investigation had revealed, someone capable of extraordinary malice hidden behind a facade of community service. I raised my hand, and Karen acknowledged me with obvious reluctance. "The resident wishes to address the board. You have 3 minutes." I approached the podium slowly, keeping my expression downcast. "Thank you for allowing me to speak. The past few weeks have been difficult, as many of you know. My rescue horse, Thunder, died tragically from poisoning." Murmurs spread through the audience. Karen tapped her gavel lightly. "Please keep comments relevant to compliance issues." "This is entirely relevant," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "Because before discussing my property compliance, there is something this community should know about its HOA leadership." The community center's main doors opened, and 6 agents in FBI windbreakers entered the room, positioning themselves strategically around the perimeter. Karen's face registered confusion, then alarm, as I reached into my jacket and removed my federal credentials. "Karen Westfield, I am Special Agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division. I am here to serve federal warrants for your arrest on charges of money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy, and animal cruelty, resulting in death." The room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Karen stood abruptly, her chair toppling backward. "This is absurd. You cannot interrupt an official HOA meeting with these ridiculous accusations." The lead agent of our operation stepped forward, official documents in hand. "We have search warrants for your residence, vehicles, and this HOA office, Ms. Westfield. Additionally, we have surveillance footage clearly showing you poisoning the horse on agent's property, resulting in its death. You are under arrest." As agents moved toward the board table, Karen looked wildly around the room, perhaps seeking support from community members who had previously followed her lead without question. Instead, she found stunned faces and shocked expressions as her neighbors processed the dramatic revelation. The carefully constructed persona of community leader was crumbling before their eyes. "You set me up," she hissed as I approached. "You were never just a homeowner." "No," I agreed quietly. "And you were never just an HOA president. The difference is, my rescue animals were real. Your concern for this community was not." The agents read Karen her rights as her wrists were secured in handcuffs. The community watched in silence as she was escorted from the building, past the very rules board she had weaponized against so many neighbors. As the door closed behind them, the remaining board members looked to me in confusion and growing comprehension. "I apologize for the disruption," I told the assembled residents. "But this was about much more than HOA violations. Karen Westfield has been using this community as cover for criminal operations, forcing out homeowners who questioned her authority and committing serious federal crimes. The investigation is ongoing, and you will all have opportunities to provide statements about your experiences with her leadership." As the meeting disbanded in stunned disarray, several residents approached me with stories of their own harassment experiences. The pattern was consistent, confirming what we had already discovered. Karen had systematically targeted anyone who might interfere with her criminal activities or question her authority. The HOA had become her personal fiefdom and a perfect front for money laundering operations. Outside in the parking lot, I watched as the FBI vehicle containing Karen pulled away. The federal agent in me felt professional satisfaction at a successful operation, but the sanctuary owner in me knew that Thunder's justice was only beginning. The federal indictment against Karen Westfield included 27 counts spanning financial crimes, racketeering, and animal cruelty. The investigation expanded following her arrest, revealing connections to organized crime figures across 3 states. Her role in the money laundering operation had been more significant than initially suspected. She had not merely been cleaning money, but had served as a regional coordinator for property-based laundering schemes. My testimony during the preliminary hearing focused on the animal cruelty charges. The courtroom fell silent as the security footage played, clearly showing Karen approaching Thunder's water trough with a container of antifreeze mixture. The veterinary experts testified about the painful death the poison had caused, describing in clinical detail the suffering Thunder had endured. Karen sat expressionless at the defense table, but her attorney's request for bail was promptly denied due to flight risk and the severity of charges. While the legal proceedings advanced through the system, a transformation began in Rolling Hills Estates. The remaining HOA board members resigned, acknowledging their failure to recognize Karen's manipulation. A community meeting was called to elect new leadership and reconsider the extensive regulations that had been weaponized for years. Margaret Chen approached me after this meeting, tears in her eyes. "We should have questioned things sooner. So many people were hurt by her rules, so many neighbors driven away. And your beautiful horse, I cannot imagine your pain." Other residents expressed similar sentiments, many admitting they had remained silent out of fear rather than agreement with Karen's dictates. The healing process for the community would take time, but the first steps had begun with honest acknowledgement of collective responsibility. On a crisp autumn morning 3 months after Thunder's death, I held a small memorial ceremony in the pasture where he had finally known happiness. Several neighbors attended, bringing wildflowers and handwritten notes. We planted an oak sapling in his favorite grazing spot, a living monument that would grow stronger with each passing year. Thunder came to me broken, I told the gathered neighbors. His body was damaged, but his spirit remained strong. In the short time he was with me, he recovered not just physically but emotionally. He learned to trust again, to play again, to live without fear. That transformation is what I choose to remember, not how his life ended, but how brightly he lived despite his past. The community association that replaced the dissolved HOA adopted a dramatically different approach. Minimal regulations focused on safety rather than aesthetics, democratic decision-making processes, and explicit protections for rescue animals and rehabilitation efforts. They asked me to consult on the new bylaws, ensuring that animal welfare provisions would be permanently enshrined in community governance. The prosecution of Karen Westfield proceeded methodically through the justice system. She eventually accepted a plea agreement rather than face trial on all counts. The sentence was substantial: 15 years in federal prison without possibility of early parole, plus financial restitution to all homeowners who had been forced to sell under her intimidation campaigns. The judge made specific mention of the animal cruelty charges during sentencing, noting that such deliberate malice toward an innocent creature revealed a profound character defect deserving of maximum punishment. 6 months after Thunder's death, I stood before the freshly painted barn considering my next steps. The sanctuary had remained operational throughout the ordeal, but Thunder's absence left a void that affected all aspects of the property. The oak sapling planted in his memory had taken root, its young leaves catching the afternoon sunlight. As federal agent, I had seen justice served through the legal system. As sanctuary owner, I needed something more for my own healing. The county animal control officer called that afternoon. "We have a situation that might interest you," he explained. Another neglect case, a 4-year-old mare rescued from abandoned property. The owners disappeared, leaving several animals without food or water. She is severely underweight but showing remarkable spirit despite everything. We remembered your facility and your experience with Thunder. I hesitated, the pain of loss still fresh. I am not certain I am ready for another horse so soon. I understand completely, the officer replied. But something about this mare reminded me of how you described Thunder when he first arrived. That same look in her eyes, wounded but not broken. Take your time deciding. She will be at the county facility for at least 2 weeks receiving initial treatment. Against my own cautious instincts, I drove to the county animal shelter the next day. The mare stood in a temporary paddock, her ribs clearly visible beneath a dull chestnut coat. When I approached the fence, she watched me warily but did not retreat. Instead, after several minutes of observation, she took one tentative step forward, then another. I extended my hand palm up, empty and non-threatening, just as I had done with Thunder on our first meeting. The mare stretched her neck, nostrils flaring as she caught my scent. Then, in a moment that broke through my carefully maintained emotional barriers, she gently touched her muzzle to my fingers. 2 weeks later, the mare, now named Phoenix, arrived at my sanctuary. The loading process was difficult, her previous trauma making the trailer frightening, but with patience and gentle encouragement, she eventually stepped aboard. When we arrived home, I led her slowly past Thunder's memorial oak toward the same pasture where he had recovered his strength and spirit. Phoenix explored cautiously, examining every corner of her new home with the hypervigilance common to abused animals. As sunset painted the pasture in golden light, She finally lowered her head and began to graze, the first sign of relaxation in a creature constantly braced for danger. Watching her from the fence line, I felt something shift within my own healing process. My work as a federal agent continued, building cases and pursuing justice through official channels. But my time at the sanctuary took on renewed purpose. Phoenix would never replace Thunder. Each rescue animal brought its own unique spirit to this place. But through her rehabilitation, I found a path forward through grief. The sanctuary that had begun as a counterbalance to the darkness I witnessed in my federal work had now become something more, a testament to resilience, a place where healing happened in both directions. Karen Westfield had sought to destroy something beautiful through cruelty and malice. Instead, her actions had ultimately strengthened both the community and my resolve to protect vulnerable creatures. As Phoenix raised her head from grazing to gaze curiously in my direction, I felt Thunder's memory honored not through vengeance but through continuation. The sacred work of healing would go on. In my years with the FBI, I had learned that justice comes in many forms. Sometimes it arrives through courtroom verdicts and prison sentences. Other times, it manifests in new beginnings and second chances. For Thunder, justice meant ensuring his death served purpose, revealing a criminal enterprise, transforming a community, and creating space for another injured soul to find safety. As federal agent and sanctuary keeper, I had learned the most powerful lesson of all. True justice is not found solely in punishment of wrongdoing, but in the restoration of what was broken. Standing beside Thunder's memorial oak, my hand resting on its slender trunk while watching Phoenix cautiously explore her new home, I finally found peace with how this chapter had unfolded. "Your life mattered," I whispered to Thunder's memory. "What happened to you changed everything, for this community, for other animals who will find sanctuary here, and for me. That is a legacy no one can poison."